Good day, everyone. Um, I'm here to present um, a subject titled The Sequence of the Transition of the Yoruba Architecture. My conference number is 0362 for this presentation. Going to the introduction. The study examined the transition of the compound house to the late modern. Actually, the compound house is the earliest form of Yoruba architecture, and how it transits to late modern. It's a very complex maze which this study attempts to examine. Indeed, the study is more or less an attempt to search for the modern variant of Yoruba traditional architecture. In doing this, the authors examine the works, ideas, and frameworks of Yoruba traditional architecture against the backdrop of Brazilian architecture, colonial and post-colonial architecture. First of all, let me talk about the Yoruba people. The Yoruba people are a tribe that are settled in sub-Saharan Africa, traversing the republics of Benin, Togo, Nigeria, and parts of Sierra Leone. Indeed, they also spread to other parts of Brazil. Hence, this study attempts a synthesized pattern for the transition of Yoruba architecture that led to late modern architecture, the sequence of the transitions and the relationship among the influences that led to this transition. Now, this map shows the location of the Yoruba people traversing the bight of Benin, Togo, parts of Nigeria to parts of Sierra Leone. Now, let me quickly discuss transition contextualized within this study. Insight into the context of transition for this study can be viewed from the backdrop of architectural transition in the West. In the West, like which is the global North, domiciled countries of prosperous economies, art connoisseurs, avant-gardes, and curious observers of the architectural landscape, one could observe that, architecture as Western architecture have transited history, beginning from the Byzantine to the Romanesque to the Gothic, and so it has transited for quite some time, even to more recent forms, the Art Nouveau, Art Deco, and the International style, to postmodernism architecture. So one can observe quite a distinct variation in transition. The context of Yoruba traditional architecture, which sprang from ideas of unknown designers, transition is not really it's not really a trend. In fact, the Yoruba traditional architecture does not really transit. The architecture is generally assumed as sacred, and it does not really transit like other parts of the more prosperous economies of the global North. But with the incursion of white settlers, it began to transit, and over the years to late modern architecture. And we shall examine that in the course of this presentation. But let's quickly look at the compound house. What is the compound house? The compound house is the Yoruba traditional architecture of Yoruba people. It is a very plain, undecorated structure. It is in the form of an hollow square, horseshoe, and features a large single or more buildings with courtyards bounded by the veranda. This is the courtyard in plan. As can be seen, this is the veranda, and these are the rooms, and this is a very large courtyard. This is the plan of the compound house. Well, this is the elevation of the compound house. And now let's quickly look at the evolution of the Yoruba compound houses and how it eventually transited. The compound house transited because of missionary efforts. The missionaries that came from the Western world, the global North, and they achieved this by Western education, which encouraged nuclear family, and as a result, enhance the disintegration of the extended family collective living, resulting in dissolution of the compound house. And secondly, because of slave trading that lasted between the 16th and the 19th century, and freed slaves from Brazil infiltrated sub-Saharan Africa and brought along with them, the Afro-Brazilian bungalows, which are very heavily ornamented with pilasters and balustrades, and so they began to modulate and mediate the concept of the compound house, and invented their own template. As can be seen in this is a Brazilian architecture, and this is another prototype of the Brazilian architecture. And so the Yoruba compound house transited because of the influence of freed slaves from Brazil to the Brazilian architecture. And then going further, another influence that precipitated the transition of the Yoruba compound house is the colonial incursion. The colonial brought along with them their styles, following the influence of the Brazilian and Portuguese architecture, which precipitated the Brazilian style to the Yoruba townscape in the 1800s, was colonization. The British colonization was about 1900. The concept of the British colonial houses are normally characterized by continuous horizontal band of windows and overhanging eaves. A typical example is this. You can see the overhanging eaves in this colonial school, designed and constructed around 1954. And so, following that, we also have the post-colonialism, which promoted the need for the awareness that linked architecture to national development. Thus, countries and states in sub-Saharan Africa and southwestern coastal areas of Africa, mostly inhabited by Yoruba people and Yoruba extraction, employed the international style to achieve this. And this is an example of post-colonial architectural influence in the Yoruba townscape. These examples used organic materials that could be found in the environment, alongside hybrid and alongside with the colonial architecture. Thus, it is an hybrid of the international style and the colonial architecture. So the import of this style on residential architecture in southwestern coastal Africa, inhabited by the Yoruba people, is minimalist architecture. The import of the post-colonial architecture on residential buildings is minimalist architecture, which is usually very monotonous, as can be seen from these plates. And this trend is what has been achieved in this study, from the compound house through the influence of the Brazilian freed slaves leading to the Brazilian style, and then the influence of the colonial masters leading to late modern architecture, and the influence of the international style on the late modern architecture in residential building leading to minimalist architecture. So in conclusion, the study persists that the modern variant of the Yoruba compound house is late modern, and it is the product of architectural succession. The study further showed that the spatial layout of the late modern captures the cultural and spiritual significance of the compound house. Thank you for listening.